and share your screen. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this pop-up webinar on Virginia Geo Inquiries, hosted by Virginia Geographic Alliance. My name is Andrew Dojak. I'm here with Chris Bunin and Georgianne Rybar. And Georgianne is going to talk to you right now about using Virginia Geo Inquiries to teach Virginia studies. Georgianne, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I'm going to let you know about Virginia Geo Inquiries that were developed through the auspices of Esri and the Virginia Geographic Alliance. What is a Geo Inquiry? Well, it's a scripted learning activity and it has a map, the heart of a geographic information system. Has multiple layers, tools, and symbols, and it's designed to be inquiry-based. Students are asked a series of questions. They interact with the map to answer them. All of the geo inquiries in this collection are Virginia-based, and they're all tied to the Virginia SOL. We designed them for 30 minutes-ish because you could run through them in 15 minutes, but chances are you're going to want to discuss things with your students, have them ask questions, make hypotheses, and more. The Geo Inquiry really has two pieces. One is the Geo Inquiry itself, which is a PDF, and we'll look at those shortly. And I have put the link there for you. They are on the Virginia Geographic Alliance website under the title Virginia Geo Inquiries. And the second thing, the PDFs have answers on them. So we want your students to be able to perchance answer them without having the answers, because that sort of defeats the whole purpose. And to that end, we have some Geo Inquiry docs on Google. And of course, I've practiced this before. It doesn't, from the PowerPoint, I can't show them to you, but if you type that URL in, you will see them. So what Geo Inquiries do we have? Right now, our collection has 6. Where Virginia Lives, that looks at towns, cities, census designated places. Virginian Opinions in the Revolutionary War. Agriculture in Virginia. The Virginia Geo Inquiry about civil rights, standing up to Jim Crow. We are so privileged to have the author of this Geo Inquiry with us today. Something with a science bend, land use in the Chesapeake Bay. And then the last one, resources and economy, really concentrates on getting the coal from the market in Southwest Virginia to the ports of Hampton Roads. As you can see from the image, part of this Geo Inquiry includes 3D modeling of coal mines, both strip and underground in Virginia. But there's more. Coming soon, we have Virginia Waterways, and there's also the Virginia Geo Inquiry that compares the English settlements and the Indian settlements in the past and today. That's still under construction, so that will be in our lineup soon. And this isn't going to help, but if I go here, you can see how to access them. I'm on the Virginia Geographic Alliance website. The second one in is Virginia Geo Inquiries, and you can access them. I'm going to let Chris, when you access them, it is really important that you don't do the usual and just click on it. I guess you can. So you would download this document, and this is the document for the teacher. It has a link to the map, and I'm going to stop sharing and let Chris walk us through standing up to Jim Crow.
Chris, I'm setting you up as host now, so just give me 1 second. I will say this for all the additional participants out there now. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and I will answer them as we are working. Chris, you are now host. You can share your screen.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. Where is the share? Never mind. Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
We
Okay,
can hear
just
you.
check on that. Okay, cool. Always get a little tweaked out or a little off about sharing.
It's better to share your whole screen than the app.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, there it is. Great. Okay, you're right. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And you'll just cut this out, Andy, when we get rolling here, okay? Or when we record, okay?
Yep.
Yeah, as Georgianne said, thank you for joining us this afternoon. You know, it was really exciting to write these geo inquiries because so often in Virginia studies and in U.S. history, there is such an emphasis on when things happen, and it's really a challenge to help students understand where things happen and really see that interplay between history and geography. So I personally, and I believe I speak for Andy and Georgianne, find that GIS really allows you to help students really see the connections that geography play in the shaping of history and vice versa. So as Georgianne said, the geo inquiries are set up with a nice, tight 2-page PDF front back. It follows the geo inquiry process, which really is following the inquiry process. You will see that it's set up with an ask section. If you see the dark arrow next to the statements, that means it's a direction, and a question is a question that you would ask your students as they look at the map. And so it follows the geographic inquiry model of ask, acquire, explore, analyze, and act. And on the back page are also some technical tips to help you navigate GIS. Before you do a geo inquiry, certainly test drive it because it might be new to you. Also, there might be some links that have broken and we need to update it. So definitely test drive it first. Little story about this activity, standing up to Jim Crow. We really were very conscientious while designing this is to think about how can we use GIS to teach about the untold stories, the stories that don't make it into our master narrative or the main narrative due to SOL requirements, time constraints, or just the way history is told, right? History is also often told with these flashpoints in history, and there are so many things that are underneath those flashpoints or just outside of those that were also significant. So when you open up this geo inquiry, you will click on this bit.ly URL, and it will bring you to this geo inquiry. And to follow the directions, it asks you to say, go ahead and open up map note number 1. And if you look at the map, you'll see these little dots here are map notes that we dropped in. And map note number 1 asks the teacher to just share with the students what were Jim Crow laws, and specifically what were Jim Crow laws in Virginia. And as the map note reads, Jim Crow laws were a collection of state and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. This included laws for marriage, education, public accommodations, and travel. For example, the Virginia legislature passed a law in 1906 requiring segregated streetcar travel. So then they ask you to look at the patterns of segregation and how many laws were passed by state. And so it asks you to quickly click on a few states to see the map pop-up information. And that's the other nice thing about this GIS map. If you think about it, the G stands for geography, or the map that we're looking at. The information is what we're seeing underneath these states, and the system is how, when I click on the map, information starts to pop up. And so one thing to note when we click on Virginia or any other state, there were a lot of different types of laws. So depending on the level of your students and their vocabulary, you could talk about why different types of laws, why explicit laws like transportation and implicit laws such as marriage or voting. And then the nice thing about GIS maps is they are layered maps. And to find the layers in your map, you have to come over here to the left-hand side and choose to show content. And then you can say, let's look at the difference in public accommodation laws and state laws. And you'll notice that the map changes, and you can turn off layers. And you can ask a different pattern of where was Jim Crow, where was public accommodation segregation more prominent in the United States. Not that it didn't exist in other states, but where did you see states passing lots of public accommodation laws? And so notice here's Kentucky, where there were 11 laws that limited the access to public accommodations. And so you could ask students, like, why would they want to segregate these accommodations? What role does transportation play in people's lives? And then the real question, the focus we wanted on this lesson was that Jim Crow did not stop everyday life for African Americans and Black American or African Americans. They stood up to Jim Crow. They figured out ways to operate within the system while working to change the system. And so the next aspect says, click on the map note in New York. And this introduces students to the Green Book. It's a book that was made into an Academy Award-winning film a couple of years ago. But really, the Green Book was a guidebook for African-American road travelers. It was created and published by the African-American mailman Victor Hugo Green, and he created various publications of this guidebook from 1936 to 1966 to give travelers a guide as to where you could travel in the South and throughout the United States and find accommodations that would accommodate you if you were Black. And so notice what we embedded in here. If a student would like to, you click on it and it takes you to the New York Public Library, where it shows you pages of the of the Green Book. So if you would like for students to do a little bit of primary source analysis, you can definitely take this to a new level, and you'll see it. We've set it for the page in Virginia. After that, we then ask you to look at patterns of Green Book locations in Virginia specifically. And for that, we set up a bookmark so that you click on, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to do this. Sorry about that. During our this break from school, my kids are hungry, and so I had to send my kid up to get some food. So let's pick this back up again. So we've embedded some bookmarks. So when you click on bookmarks, you can zoom down to the state of Virginia, and here's where we want you to turn on Green Book locations, and you'll notice that the locations have been clustered by numbers. And when you hover over and click on any of these, it'll bring up a cluster of different locations. And so right here in this area, there were 10 places that were listed in the Green Book. And then you can browse the features right here. So you can click through and start to look at the different places, and students will probably be drawn to what places were in our location. And that was our goal too, that history happens in your backyard. It didn't just happen somewhere. So all of these events impacted a Virginia in some way in their backyard. And so the goal was to have students say, look, this isn't just about what's happening in Richmond or in New York. What was happening near you? And so they can work their way through these different locations. And really the goal is for students to see that most of the places listed in the Green Book were restaurants and hotels. Then we also want them to say, well, do you notice any connections to the important transportation corridors? And you'll notice that most of these are in larger cities. And you ask students like, well, why would people be traveling to these cities? They'd be traveling for work. They'd be traveling to visit family. And then we wanted to highlight a few of these locations because Virginia had a destination listed in the Green Book, and it is over here at Bayshore Beach near Norfolk, Virginia, where actually I guess it's it's Hampton. And so when you go to this area, you can click on this primary source that shows you an advert. Come to Buckrow Beach in Hampton, Virginia, and the students can look at this advertisement, and what they would see is that it's one of the oldest recreational regions. It gives a little history of why it's called Buckrow Beach, tied to the Buckrow plantation, but it also shows you that a number of African-American businessmen got together and built a destination that had it all, so that people wanting to travel to go on vacation, you don't have to deal with segregated areas and discrimination. Here you have a place that, well, to say you wouldn't have to deal with it is a very mistaken thing, but once you got to this location, you had a place that was for Black travelers, a destination that had it all. And then we finished the activity with saying, here's the Green Book, but how are other ways that everyday Virginians stood up to Jim Crow in the Commonwealth? And for that, we went to a place that definitely doesn't make it into the history books very often as an important spot for protesting Jim Jim Crow in San Antonio, and that's Farmville, Virginia. And so with this activity, you take it down to Farmville and it posts a few map notes. Map note number 4 shows you the Moton school strike, which was the strike that started the Brown versus Board of Education lawsuit, and to show the role that students in Farmville stood for standing up to the conditions and the disparities and the injustices of Jim Crow. And then in addition to that, in the 1960s, Farmville were doing a lot of everyday protests to impact businesses that were discriminating in Farmville. This is one that I found that was really interesting. A group of African-American protesters that literally took turns going in the line and buying tickets and being turned down. And when they got turned down, they'd get back in line the entire afternoon and walk through and make the person just continuously say, no, I cannot sell you a ticket because this is a movie theater reserved for white people. And just getting in line throughout the day in a nonviolent protest way. Often we give these credits to the freedom marchers and the freedom fighters that marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, but here you have everyday people practicing those same words and putting those words to action. And the 6th one, when you click on it, it talks about showing somebody picketing in front of a grocery store saying, don't buy your groceries in Farmville, go outside of Farmville. Do not give your tax dollars and your income to the people who are not allowing you to desegregate this community. And that's the goal. That's how this activity works. It's really, the end result is how do we bring in the everyday actions, the unknown, the marginalized histories, and GIS really does a good job of showing that. Let me zoom back out to the full extent to Jim Crow. And that is Standing Up to Jim Crow, Virginia Geo Inquiry number 5.